Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. The last video I made before this was very, very well done, as far as I can tell. Because of my condition, I can't review it. I suggest you all see it and you all weigh in the comments. This video is about Patrice Williams, I believe her name is. This is more important than you might think. So, the word scripture is a play on words for Crips root. No one knows exactly why that is. No one alive right now knows exactly why that is. They know more or less why that is. It has to do with people being crippled, but it also is something that over time they've connected to the idea of the Crip gang. Not any specific Crip gang, not Snoop Dogg, not this people in Stockton or LA or Seaside or Sacramento or San Jose, but the idea of people who wear blue, who are superimposing themselves on the Skywalker, whose colors are yellow, white, and blue. Right, Horus, it's a play on words for hero, the heroic Skywalker. Now, when I was 19 years old, about to turn 20, around the time of 9/11 in 2001, I was dating a black female named Patrice. And I'm part black, part white. That's more important than you think. We'll get to that momentarily here with the Nigerian rapper Burna Boy. We'll get to that. I don't know him. We'll get to that. So anyway, I was going to Santa Cruz, right? Santa Cruz is a play on words for Satan Cruz and Satan Sea Roos and Satan Crows. And there's a lot of connections there, and I won't have time to get into them. So leading up to that, I hung out with a lot of gang members in San Jose, Crips, Bloods, sometimes Northerners. Morgan Hill, I used to hang out with a lot of Northerners. Okay. Because when I look at society, the closest thing to a culture that would help me find true love, and I was looking for true love my whole life, and I'm 44 years old, I'm single, okay, because of being shunned. The word shun is like the word son. And of course they worship Cronus, whose name is a play on words for the crow sun. It was a deity of sacrificing people's souls and their children's souls to evil so they can find their life in this world. His counterpart is El, who's said to be the father of Baal, aka Bel, who's the main antagonist, the main enemy of God in the Bible, basically. So I was visiting this female, Patrice. I met her on a fluke. Her mother was a police dispatcher. You can't make this up, because recently in Stockton, another child is said to be, in San Joaquin County, right, this police officer was a former Sacramento police officer. He's said to have stabbed his 11-year-old son to death and have been shot to death by the police, if I'm not mistaken. And that was recently here. And there was also another drive-by where 2 people were shot in Stockton as well after the birthday shooting. So I'm dating this female, and because I was going there by myself, there was kind of thugs there at the time. It's a little bit different now in Santa Cruz than it was back then. I used to drive over there very high strung, okay? I'd have my hair braided, I'd wear blue, I had been in a car accident, I'd been stabbed already in life. I was a very serious person, very dedicated to being a revolutionary. To me, the word Crip meant community, revolution, and progress. I was very dedicated to it. I was willing to die for God at the drop of a hat. I was a very angry person, very focused person. A very deadly martial artist. Even by the time I was 17, there was no one who could beat me in single combat, with weapons, what have you, okay, on the planet. In terms of, martial art combat, right? I don't train to shoot guns and so on and so forth. I'm not a violent person. Anyway, so I drive there. I drive through Watsonville. Watsonville, is a city known for a lot of Hispanic gangs there, what have you. And, it would get a rise out of me. So to make a long story short, we ended up having an argument. We ended up having a lot of arguments. And one time I got on record and I said, look, I never hurt you, what have you. Sometimes I get very angry, but I never hurt you. I don't have a problem with my temper. I don't beat women. I never beat women in my life. That's not me. Okay. But I got very angry. And so we got in an argument. She hung up on me. She had a pager at the time and not a phone. So I couldn't contact her, and I'm swelling up with hatred. And the government had hacked my brain. They, the workers, people who work for the government have admitted that to me. They actually set me up to commit a crime. And so I call her back and I start huffing and puffing about how I'm this big bad gangster, so on and so forth, and that, that she fucked up and so on and so forth. Okay, I wasn't even thinking about whether or not I was going to get away with it. I was just so angry. I didn't think about the recording that she made at all, nothing like that. Just so angry, I just started shooting off at the mouth. Okay? She ends up telling her counselor at school. I end up getting in trouble. So now I go to Santa Cruz County Jail. It's around 9/11, right? It's like October 2001. That's very significant as well. And I'm locked up with a bunch of Southerners and Crips and Bloods. Okay? Some from Seaside, one guy from LA. He was like the guy in charge of the blacks in the cell block. Okay, and that had occurred here. And I brought up, San Jose, which I would then move into an apartment within a year or so after that. And I moved into an apartment full of people who, were either gang members or they brought gang members around, what have you. So I lived a very serious life growing up. By the time I was like 16 or so, 17, I had been stabbed. I was already a martial arts champion. That's why I didn't get killed when I was stabbed. I basically chased the person away, even though he stabbed me. The story for another day. I was such a deadly and intense person. And I still am, but I'm getting old, sort of crippled, what have you. I have my top martial arts challenge. I have to be able to recover. People have to rally to me and help me recover because they're fuming me and poisoning me every day, but the challenge is still going. Because I'm that much of a very serious and focused and intense and fierce martial art hero with heart. This is why God set me apart. You see that in Psalm 89, the Lord anointed a warrior, right? The root and offspring of David. So why do I bring up this Patrice Williams? Well, because the female's name was Patrice, but there's more than that. The one female I dated from Stockton looked very similar to Patrice. And let me briefly tell you the story of that. So I meet her on the internet, what have you. I'm going to college at the time. I'm supposed to pick up my little brother from some town, but I end up telling him, hey, is it cool if I don't pick you up? He ended up getting a hotel. So I go out on a limb to meet someone I never met before. And I'm driving a Chrysler at the time, 300M, and it's in very bad shape. So, make a long story short, I go visit her, whoop-de-whoop-de, we do whatever we do, and when I'm going to drop her off, because I've driven so much and the car's in such bad shape, even though I'm a brain surgeon's son, right? And this is a while back, my parents have money to some degree, but they're so sabotaged by society at the time, we'll say, to keep it simple, that I'm doing bad. So I lived very much like a poor person. Especially because when I moved in San Jose, for example, I moved into lower income apartments by Oak Ridge Mall called Ohlone, Chynoweth on Pearl and Chynoweth. I'm at 5 minutes away from Seven Trees, and the Seven Trees guys, to some degree, frequent in those apartments. And one of them had an apartment there. And he was actually, he was around Deshaun Campbell's, around the time that he murdered Officer Fontana. It's a story for another day. However, I have nothing to do with that murder. I don't condone it, what have you. But my life has a certain, there's a certain relevance here, right? Where you see in the Stockton shooting that there's Crips and Bloods. In the Stockton, even though arguably those guys kill more people than black gang members in San Jose, I'd say black gang members in San Jose had a higher kind of standard. Right? Seven Trees was more notorious than any Crip organization from Stockton. And as I believe it remains to this day, right? For example, they're on Sibo's album when he started naming various Crips from the gangster Crip organization and their allies, what have you. Okay, so to make a long story short, how you win people over isn't by being boring, right? The Board of Education, it's boring. And the bore is a form of set. Set is boring, right? That's why the churches and the mosques and the synagogues, to a large degree, are boring. They don't have the spirit. Now, when people die, there's something to be said about that, something to be said about marriages, but they're not valid marriages. And that has everything to do with this. This case actually centers around me. That's why I told you this story. I don't promote gang-related lifestyles. I'm not a gang member. I gave up all kind of connections to gangs, and I stopped thinking it was cool and all that back in 2015. And in 2020, I realized I was Christ. And a lot of what is going on here is the government trying to keep people from understanding who they are because they don't want God to restore the divine order. Because people in the government worship the devil. Even the word government is a play on words for, or not a play on words, it's the word government is derived from govern and ment, meaning mind, like in the word mental and in the word mentality. Okay, so these are pieces of the story I thought that everyone should know. I put myself out there a little bit. I forgot to tell you, right? So the Chrysler 300M, how that story ended, right? Well, I was trying to save myself about 10 miles. So I ended up having to drop her off at the bus stop. Okay, and I feel kind of bad about that, right? I'm not a player, never was, not a cheap person. I was authentically concerned about the car breaking down. And this is something that, all these things I described in this video that are rather unfortunate, they could have been avoided if the government had made it clear, if the churches had made it clear that I'm Christ the whole time. The money would have never been a problem. A lot of the things that happened in my life, a lot of the embarrassing things that happened would have never happened. A lot of the gang clashes would have never happened. The economy would have been fixed. We wouldn't have homelessness and all these, 100,000 people dying of drugs every year, 60,000 people dying of lack of adequate access to health care, 50,000 suicides a year. We wouldn't have all these horrible things occurring. But because of the greed of the churches, because of the greed of the governing class, because of racial pride, because of the greed of the LGBT community, because of the greed of political parties and social clubs and corporations, the American spirit is full of too much arrogance to give me my rightful place. And ask yourself, is the proverb true that says, better is open rebuke than love that is concealed? So ask yourself, should someone try to help their fellow man, or should they not try to help them out of some twisted conception in regards to what it means to be polite? So when we see in Matthew 7, right, one of the best chapters in the Bible, it says, first remove the log from your own eye, then you'll be able to see clearly to remove the log from your brother's eye. So you are supposed to judge, but you're supposed to come into the divine order. It's not a coincidence that they call it a log, because it has to do with the tree of knowledge. And the tree of knowledge is dead. It's the tree of the dead. It's the tree of, masonry, and the tree of the government and the intelligence agencies and all their repositories of information. It's the tree of complete idiots who wish to effectuate the malicious agenda of the devil instead of having the heart to live a righteous life. The way, the truth, and the life. I am the way. The truth is I am the Son of God. And the way to heaven is to obey God through me and to live a morally precise life. Think about what it means when I say universal, pinpointed moral precision and focused moral intensity. Thank you.